Hey there, I'm Tam,
And I'm Eternally Mortal.
and this is the Hidden Egg podcast where we talk about vulnerability.
Hello, 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 and welcome back.
So, we're going to go straight into the responses that we got since last time. We got one from Ben Ulancy, which I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. And he says that it's really nice to put a voice to the name. And I think that that's been an overwhelming perspective. It is interesting to be able to kind of read through somebody's work knowing what they sound like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's probably just like faces, like you envision a voice or a face, and then all of a sudden you learn that you are very wrong, typically.
He also wanted to know if the page was mutually owned, and it's not. Eternally Mortal actually has his own page. He just doesn't really
I
advertise it.
I am not currently in a promotion sort of phase. My writing is to prove to myself that it's worthwhile. I think I might have said something about this before, but it's okay. I'm happy to repeat myself. And I probably will do so fairly often, depending on how many of these we make. But no, I'm just kind of writing for the creation of it, not necessarily to promote at this time. But Eternally Mortal is my name if you want to come look for me, Ben. And thank you. We appreciate the compliment.
And Ben also mentioned that he's considering doing a podcast as well, which that'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
We'll
mm-hmm.
have like podcast buddies.
Best of luck.
Jenny Lane also does a podcast, so already getting some podcast buddies.
Cool, cool.
Fun times. We got this one from Molten Leaves,
Beautiful username. I love it.
and they said that we're an amazing influence on the beginners of medium, which I don't know if that's we or if
I think
it's
that's
directed
probably
at
more
me.
you
I'm not.
there, Tam.
I mean, I don't know. I don't do the follower to follower thing anymore, so
That
I don't
doesn't.
know if I'm really affecting beginners the same way that I was.
Well, I mean, it seems like maybe you're inspiring people, so kind of just deal with it, maybe.
You shut your face. Anyway, Molten Leaves also said that we'll grow together and support each other, and I love that
It's beautiful.
so much.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You Good, one of our
Welcome back, you good.
podcast favorites. Um, you're all our favorites, but You Good is special because she kind of gave us the name and the idea for this.
Friend of the show, we would say.
Friend of the
Friend of the show, you good.
That's a good one. She asked if the listening on my page actually gives me that read time. Excuse me. And it doesn't. I looked. It doesn't. I think after a while it like takes the time that you're not actively scrolling on the page and counts that as a away time.
Interesting. You think Medium has an AFK part of their algorithm? That's interesting.
Yeah,
Maybe.
when I researched it months back, they actually said that they had some way of telling when people had, you know, just opened the tab but weren't actively working on that tab or like left their computer or whatever. So I don't know how they do it, but it's apparently true because I did not get an hour's worth of read time on that article from anybody.
Well, hey, Medium, just to let you know, sometimes I reread things like multiple times, and I don't scroll when I'm doing that. So, just saying.
And then they also came around and said that they're going to save the compliments for after we record this episode.
Right. So, as a response to the compliments episode, you good will probably give us compliments. How dare, how dare. But, yeah, that's okay. We'll have a little, connector from previous episode to current episode in the future, and that's kind of nice, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
And she decided to beat us up for not liking mint and ketchup.
Valid. I'm one of the very, very few that just really dislikes ketchup.
And then we had.
That I've met, at least.
And then we had Miss Peach.
Hi, Miss Peach.
Who made me very uncomfortable, and it really filters into our topic that we'll get to in a little bit.
Actually, we'll go ahead and let you know what that topic is. We're going to be talking about receiving compliments today, correct?
Yeah.
The vulnerability of what it means to receive compliments.
And Miss Peach gave me a compliment and said that I'm an amazing
Topical.
writer and that they are inspired by me, and I don't know what to do or say about that because I feel like that is wrong somehow. And they told me to get over it, basically. So, yeah, fun times.
It's deserved, but I understand being uncomfortable.
I got a big thing from Lorna, and it was an email, so I'm not gonna read it out or anything. But there were a few points that she mentioned that I really wanted to bring up on the podcast. First off, she read through Carrie's cost of vulnerability and had, a huge, like, wonderful thing to say about it. That was in last week's episode where I put it on Medium, the article. I also put a link to that article. Um, but it seemed like between that and our podcast episodes, Lorna was kind of inspired to go through a kind of dark night of the soul a little bit.
A self-reflection,
Yeah.
it seems. And a self-reflection can always be one of those experiences that's potentially cathartic and potentially very painful. And if you have the stamina and will to do a journey like that, I think it can be really formative and helpful to learn about yourself, but it can also be painful to go through. So I hope it wasn't too much pain, Lorna, and I hope you learned some stuff that helped you on the other side.
It does sort of highlight how these episodes, while we try to keep it sort of light,
Do we?
well, I mean, I don't know, it seems like people have, joy listening to it, so it can't be too super deep and like stressful, but the stuff that we talk about does have the potential to trigger very deep and sometimes very painful responses within others. And if that is the case, we're not trying to make that happen, but we do feel like there's sort of a healing process that can start out that way.
Right. Actually, Tam, the way that you always described it to me in the past was, like you have to kind of like clean out a wound for it to really heal,
Yes.
and that hurts.
Yep.
And so, especially from like emotional trauma, especially from like our childhood, like that shit hurts when you clean out that wound because it's old. Um,
Boy,
but
don't
yeah,
I know it.
a podcast about vulnerability certainly has the potential to touch really deep in sensitive parts within people. And I do want actually to be able to touch those parts. I want people to be able to see themselves to their truest self. But any pain caused from it, I certainly will feel bad about. I think I've said this before, but if you feel like I personally harmed you, please let me know, and I will apologize very genuinely and profusely. Because I don't want to hurt you, I swear.
So then we had another thing from you, Good, this time in an email. And again, because it was in an email, I'm not going to go through all of it. But apparently, and I haven't checked because I am terrible at keeping up with people's writings, but there was an article that she wrote about a personal issue that's going on in her life right now that she then felt inspired to record herself reading.
Mm-hmm.
And during the reading, found herself crying, and she just was like, I can't do anything with this because I'm crying, like this isn't what people want to hear. But then they were like, you know what, to hell with it, I'm gonna do it anyway, and attributed us to that.
And honestly, you good. That's I just wanting to read your articles aloud for like contextual purposes to hear what the author's tone is. I think that's amazing and beautiful. And the fact that you read it with an emotional filter still on is beautiful. And I think it's awesome that you released it. I hope it went well, and I hope that it didn't like negatively impact you in such a way that you're going to decide that it was a terrible idea. But if it is, I totally understand. But I am impressed and inspired. So thank you.
And I think I said this to them in my return email, but I feel like in those situations, when you're crying, the person that's listening, like they hear the emotion, they hear the rawness, and the people that you're doing it for are going to be crying with you.
Maybe some people don't cry easily, but yeah,
Well,
they'll feel it.
maybe they'll cry on the inside.
They'll feel it at least.
Yeah. And then we come to Sierra and Lane, which there were a lot of comments. So many comments. I love Sierra's comments.
Hi, Sierra. Thank you very much again for your well thought out comments. We appreciate them.
Um, this one, what was it about? There's
Well,
so many comments.
well, this one, what I like about this first comment, is this a two-parter? Maybe it's not.
No, this one isn't.
It's a single part. Okay. I just like the story about the cute cashier. Like, that just makes me happy. I'm sorry you don't get to see them anymore, though. But, like, having little crushes on people at, like, stores and stuff, that's my bread and butter. I love that stuff. Um, and I think that you might be right, Sierra, that, like, the majority of people I know are more uh, more patient with audio than written. But I think it's interesting that you have a lot more patience when it comes to writing than with audio, because like that was kind of how I was in my younger years. Now I've become a lot more audio based, but that's more of a time thing than anything else.
Yeah.
I have to use my eyes in other directions while I'm consuming content now. But I think it's awesome.
Also, I am trying to get the transcripts finished for these. I am so sorry. It takes me, I have to listen to the podcast. And while the rss.com does a great job at like generating the transcript, I go through and kind of clean it up and add in the things that it misses because it's not perfect. And that takes literally the entire time that our podcasts do. And I just haven't found the time to do that yet.
Hey Tam, I just want to let you know you're forgiven.
Thanks.
It's okay.
Thanks.
Um, the extra effort you're putting in is only good, and not putting it in is not negative.
Yeah, I have a hard time parsing that.
I know, I understand. I just figured I'd say it out loud.
We had a comment from It's Always Right Now again, telling us that they don't know the awkwardness that we're talking about
So,
having.
like, currently, right now, there is an awkwardness that we feel, and if you don't feel it, that's awesome. But, like, I'm just letting you know that it totally exists.
Well, he says he sees it as relatable humans and heartwarming authenticity.
And I love that. That's so cute.
That is,
Thank you.
that is a great way of looking at it. I see it as awkwardness, though.
Actually, sometimes heartwarming authenticity is almost always awkward, maybe? Or maybe awkwardness is almost always heartwarming authenticity. Nah, there's probably
Yeah,
examples
I think
that
there's.
aren't, that don't
Yeah. Akin Moses says thank you again for the mention and says that we're doing great work.
Thank you, Keen. We appreciate that.
Jan Sebastian, which awesome, got some medium giant action going on here, says she loves this. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it, but
Thank you so much, Jan. That's so sweet. We appreciate that. Jan
and then
highlighted your tagline, which is a fantastic tagline.
Thank you. I'm wondering if I should like start shortening it just to follow yourselves always, but then like it loses a little bit if I do that.
Okay, just from my own, since I've never heard you thinking about this before, just from my perspective, I think that you should keep it the regular length. But at certain moments when it seems expeditious to do so, go ahead and shorten it. Because the people that know you will know what it means.
Right.
And will understand the thing. But keep it long. Keep it normal length for the most part, from my perspective.
And then there's more Sierra Lane.
Hi.
Love it. This one, I believe this one was on episode 5.
Seems like it.
And then there was another one he gave on episode 2. So with this one, on episode 5.
Yeah, Sierra was talking about how we were talking about allowing people into our brains to see what it looks like, and Sierra was a little like, I'm not so sure that I'm just gonna like let someone in there, and even if I did, then I don't know if I'd let them see everything, and that's so valid, Sierra. Like I think probably I think you're in a lot of good company. I think there's a lot of people that feel that same way, and maybe this is too forward or weird to say, but I have a feeling that if I did see into your brain, Sierra, I probably wouldn't judge you for it. But I guess I can't know that for sure.
To be fair, you don't judge many people for much of anything.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty reasonable to expect that you just won't judge people.
No, nobody knows me like you do. Like, these people have heard like 7 hours of me talking. That's it.
I mean, that's fair. It's
Excuse
not
me.
even 7.
I'm rounding.
Well, we're on
Even though
number
I am a numbers
6.
guy. I should have just calculated exactly how many seconds it was.
No, we're on number 6, and we don't do a full hour per podcast.
So my math is a little off. That's true.
Yeah. We're probably in hour 5 now.
Okay.
So there was another thing that they said in here. Oh, to being careful with who you're vulnerable to. Because some people will use it. We kind of covered that a little. We'll probably cover that so many places.
That's a very important point when talking about vulnerability.
It is
that you kind of have to be a little choosy, I think, with who you're vulnerable with. I think it's important to try and continue to be more vulnerable as we go through life, but you definitely have to pay attention to who the people are around you that you're being vulnerable to, because some of them are statistically going to be bad actors that won't treat you.
It's not like it's on or off. It's not like you're vulnerable or you're not vulnerable. It's more like you have a desire or an intention of being more vulnerable to the people that actually deserve that vulnerability. And whether you know, like, you don't always know if they're deserving or not, so at some points you have to kind of throw out a little bit of trust and try it out to see. But that doesn't mean that people that are constantly bad to you when you're vulnerable deserve your vulnerability. Like,
exactly. And I love how Siren brought it back, or brought it to the other direction in at the end of this comment, where talking about friends that are pretty unwilling to share certain aspects of themselves. These friends have kind of very unspoken but solid boundaries that you don't really get to look into certain points of their life. I've certainly known many people like that, and you know, I try to just interact with those people in the ways that they're comfortable with, of course, but it does get sad to know that maybe just talking to me about what their problems are for a few minutes might help them to see it in a different perspective or something. And you know, I don't get that opportunity. I don't have that choice. that's the other person's choice. So, but I get what you're talking about, I think.
And then the last comment from Sierra and Lane, which is also the last comment that I have on here, was on the second one.
Right, and I don't actually remember the context.
I think that they're talking. Okay, so I said something in that episode about my Izanami-kun YouTube, where it just didn't get the traction, and then you said something about your page or on Medium where it doesn't get the traction, and they were very different scenarios. I was trying to do promotion and didn't know how on Izanami-kun, and you aren't trying to promote yours at all, and that's why it doesn't get traction.
Like, genuinely, I get kind of excited when I don't get traction on an article for like a few days. That makes me pretty happy.
So weird.
I know. Anyway, but the first part of this is just it's some really good advice about how to promote. Honestly, like if you're looking for advice on how to promote, check out Sierra's comment on our second podcast, because it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's some good info. And then the last part of it was about the blame, and he was just kind of talking about how we mentioned that you always blame yourself, and I have this natural proclivity to blame other people, which I'm working on, but it is still the like go-to standard when I'm not paying attention.
And as every good wise person does when faced with a dichotomy like we presented, Sierra took the wise choice and said maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah.
That's how I interpreted your comment, at least.
And before we move on, I just kind of want to highlight there was this article by Blogs by Jay called "Walking on Eggshells" that I had Mortal read through, and it's a very vulnerable article talking about vulnerability. I don't think they ever actually say vulnerability.
I don't believe that they did. Jay wrote a lot of what my experience has been. Honestly, it was very impactful to me. I was impressed by it. Do you mind if I scroll over?
No, go ahead.
Because like wanting to be authentic, but being stopped from being authentic because of how your words could potentially affect others, and then hyper analyzing the different reactions that could happen from your words is something that I do like minutely. kind of. I get a little bit of comfort from that here at home with my found family, but not complete comfort from it. It's something that I struggle with every day. But, people really like me for that a lot of times, and it's uncomfortable, honestly, if I'm being completely honest about it. Because, I'm pretty considerate. I take into account what people are into, and people really like that. But at the same time, like, it's not great for my own mental health
Right.
because I end up jumping through many, many, many hoops that no one gives a shit about, and I don't need to. I'm just wasting my energy running in circles. And there was more to Blogs by Jay's article
Yeah,
than
yeah. I
just
didn't
that,
really want to
but
go through all of the different points because it's a full on article. I just wanted to mention it, and I'll link to it in the descriptions wherever I can, and let you guys read it whenever you would like to.
mm-hmm.
And so now on to the main topic. We've gone so far over.
we don't we didn't have a plan for how long that would take, did we?
I mean, I usually try to do it in the first 15 minutes so that we have like a half an hour to talk about the main thing.
Buckle up, might be a
Yep.
long one, folks.
Yeah, this might be a long one. Sorry, guys. Okay. Anyway, so the main topic is dealing with compliments, and I say dealing with because it's like it's
Because, like, let's really be honest. I don't know if this is everyone's experience, but I've heard from a lot of people now that, like, receiving compliments really, like, just impacts that imposter syndrome in a way that makes you almost defensive immediately to compliments.
yeah.
Like, people are like, "Hey, you did that really awesome," and you're like, "Oh, well, I fucking cheated because I used this tool that was obviously designed for the purpose," and it's like,
And you were way better at it.
or something,
Yeah.
like it's interesting. One of my favorite streamers was recently talking about humble culture and how maybe we don't have to be so humble all the time. Um,
True.
But yes, receiving compliments can be very difficult if you don't believe the compliment yourself.
So when because I do research and I build a little outline, which by the way, I'm thinking about putting these outlines on my Patreon. So just putting that out there.
Go for
But
it.
I'm going to kind of run through the things that I found on the general internet.
Mm-hmm.
Don't respond to them right away. I'm just going to go through them. They're on the paper. You can still see them.
That's a good
Okay.
disclaimer.
Um, so the general internet, when I looked up how to handle a compliment, or actually receiving compliments, that was all I put. Receiving compliments. I got the advice of just say thank you, or share what it means to you that whatever they complimented you with, how that means to you, like how that made you feel or whatever.
I'm not supposed to comment?
You're not supposed to comment yet.
Okay.
It's written down.
Yeah, yeah.
You acknowledge them without diminishing yourself. Remember, you have no obligation to reciprocate. 70% of people are uncomfortable receiving compliments. 70%. A lot of times it's because we have a negative view of ourselves that we don't want to receive the compliments. Remember, it's about the giver, not about you, which I don't really understand that one. And don't overthink it.
Was that the list?
That was the list.
Wow, that was hard. That was harder than I expected. I'm usually really good at just listening, but like I have so much to say about these.
I mean, I have another little thing that a little blurb, but we'll save that one for later. I have them separated.
It's interesting because some of that is actually like advice I would give to somebody that's struggling with how to receive compliments.
Yeah, but it's not what you would use yourself.
Just saying, like, for instance, just saying thank you, I understand that. Like, if your brain generates a bunch of excuses or counter compliments, then just saying thank you is, I think, appropriate
It
and
is
acceptable.
so hard. Have you done that?
Yes,
It is so
very hard.
awkward.
It is very, very hard to do.
You feel dumb.
Yeah, and I know my face looks like I'm in pain, and so they hear thank you and they're like, "What? Did I just like stab you or something?" But it's still.
I freeze. I look like a deer in headlights.
I'm taking this.
Okay.
I need to see this closer.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a couple things that I want to say. First of all, just because I'm a data dude. Um, According to the research that you did, you found that 70% are uncomfortable.
That's what Harvard Harvard Business
According to the
said.
research that Harvard did.
Whatever, I didn't even look to see what sources they used. So whatever their data was 70%.
I hope that's. I don't know. I just have a hard time with studies. Anyway,
That's fine.
But so there's a couple things. Share the meaning of it is interesting in certain situations. It's very applicable and will probably be well received. But if the meaning that you receive, that you get from a compliment, is something negative about yourself, then that is not
Right.
going
I was
to
thinking that too.
benefit
Like,
the
what if the meaning of it, like they compliment you, and what happens in your head, what it means to you is that it reminds you of some horrible trauma that happened when you were a kid, and now you're in a shame spiral.
Right.
Like,
It's certainly
are you
possible.
supposed to share that? Is that what they're saying?
Right, exactly. Um, and the part where it said that it was that the compliment is about the giver and not you, that's like if you hear a compliment from someone and you do not agree with the compliment, this is a good piece of advice to give to that person because it's like, well, the compliment that was given is from the perspective of the giver. Like they think that you have a very nice shape to your nose or whatever the fuck. And
Weird
I,
example.
I like specific weird examples. I'm sorry. And so that's just kind of like understanding that the words that someone says always tell more about that person than yourself is really important.
I think that
for some
one.
people.
I think that one it makes sense to like think about it like you're both looking at a piece of art and they're complimenting the art and you don't find that to be complimentary like oh I like the way that they drew the eyes. Well, you don't like the way they drew the eyes, but they do. And so it's not necessarily that one of you has to be wrong. It's just
Right.
it's a perspective of the art.
Right. That does touch on a very important point that I like to make in the world where you don't yuck someone's yum, Someone enjoys something, don't shit on them for it, Until they're allowed to, unless it's something. Of course everything has exceptions. If someone likes some terrible awful shit
Like
that hurts
murdering
people, then
people.
yeah, maybe don't. You go ahead and yuck their
Yeah,
yum,
go
I
ahead and
guess.
yuck that because
But,
because it hurts other people.
it's so hard to have like an absolute rule because there's exceptions to fucking everything.
That's true.
This
Anyway,
last one, don't overthink. Are you simplifying what you found, or did it actually
it actually
say
said don't overthink
You
it.
can't tell me what to do with the internet. Oh, fuck. How dare you? It's a good idea to not overthink it, but like hearing the words "don't overthink" does nothing.
Yeah, it went
to
like
someone
the
that overthinks.
website started off with that and went into this whole thing about like how different ways that we overthink the things of like, oh, what does this mean about me? What does this mean about them? What do they want from me? What am I supposed to do now that they've complimented me? Like all of these different thoughts that like they're just like don't overthink it. Just take it, accept it, move on.
I've got a point I'd like to make. Do you want me to make it at the end of all this, or do you want to do it? Can I just make it now?
You can make it now.
Cool.
Whatever.
Because I was looking at this, acknowledge them, quote unquote, don't diminish self, which basically means you acknowledge the person gave you a compliment. I acknowledge that you think I have a good shape to my nose. But then don't diminish yourself, which, a lot of people are going to say, oh, no, it's genes. I didn't have any choice in that. You know what I mean? It just came from my parents or whatever. That's just diminishing it. And when you diminish something that someone else just said, some people are going to react as if you're arguing with them.
Yeah.
So, like, what I like to look at for myself and try and express, oh, I don't like to look at it for what I like to advise other people. I don't do this for myself at all. Every time someone gives me a compliment, I blush and run away screaming. But what I like to advise other people is to try to perceive yourself in the position of the compliment giver, because I'm certain that you've given compliments that were received weird. That kind of happens all the time.
Okay, but now I have to ask, why don't you do that? If it's what you advise for other people to do, why don't you do that?
Because in the moment that a brain is triggered, the rational thought escapes.
So you literally get triggered. It is a traumatic experience for you to be complimented.
Okay, I don't know if that I will consider it a traumatic experience to get complimented, but like my brain doesn't work the way that it normally does. When someone compliments me in a specific way, I tend to kind of get like, oh no, do I have to like do something to fulfill this compliment? Because I certainly haven't done so far. Look at all this dumb, horrible shit that I've done in the past. Like, oh no, did I lie to this person? Did I make them believe that I was this thing that they're complimenting? How could I possibly have done that?
I have that
Oh,
on
do
the me
you?
side. Because
That's funny.
I put notes about my thoughts too, and that was one of them. Like that I deceived them, and
Mm.
that was the reason why. And I didn't put it on here, but I because of my I had a therapy appointment, and I've really been like trying to process a lot of that. One of the things when I think about getting a comment that I don't think I noticed consciously, but I think it happens every time is there's this part of my brain that's like, what do they want from me? What is
Mm.
this? What is this leading up to?
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about there. Because I'm very complimentary. Like a fucking hypocrite. I'm very complimentary when I go onto Twitch. And when I give compliments, I give like 20% of the ones that I think of. The other 80% just disappear into the aether before I type them because it is so easy for someone getting a compliment from someone they don't know, just a fucking weird ass username on a screen, and be like, what is this person trying to get from me? Because there's certainly a lot of people out there that give compliments only when they want something from you. And so there's a lot of people that are kind of conditioned in a certain
Well,
way to
and
feel that way.
we're not scheduled to do it anytime soon, but whenever we talk about abuse, we have to talk about the fact that abusers charm people, and what the one of the first phase is where they compliment you and they put you up on a pedestal, they idealize you.
Yeah, yeah. But but I'm
And
not.
I have been through so many different types of emotional abusers that I am now really like skeptical of anybody complimenting me because I've been trained that precedes a period of time of demands and emotional torture.
Right. Which I guess really highlights that the same thing with your vulnerability. How you react to comments is also based on who you're talking to.
Yeah. Yep.
Your perception of the person that is giving you that compliment. It's got to be because there are certainly going to be people that use this very effective tool for nefarious purposes.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point because I handle you good saying that we inspired her to do a thing way better than I handle Miss Peach. And that's not because one's better than the other. I just have had a lot more interaction with you good
mm,
than I have with Miss Peach. And therefore I like the expectations are already kind of set there.
there's a familiarity that makes it
Yeah,
more
where I
comfortable.
know that I know what this inspiration that I've caused may lead to.
Mm-hmm.
And with Miss Peach, I don't. Now, that's not your fault if you're listening, Miss Peach. There's nothing that you have to do at all. But in the spirit of being open and vulnerable, like that is definitely a huge difference in dealing with compliments that I never really thought about before.
It absolutely is, and it's something that I have thought about because while I'm giving these compliments to these streamers that I watch on Twitch, I get to know them over time, and I get the ability. Well, I'm they kind of consent to me being able to say it by not banning me from their channel. Um, to let them know that when I give a compliment, it's not an expectation of anything in the future. It's not because I expect there to be more of any specific thing, whether it's attention for me or the content that they're currently producing or the game that they're playing or whatever. It's about what's already been done. You've all From my perspective, you've already earned this compliment.
Well, in that,
And go
sorry,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
And so I can't speak for Miss Peach. I don't know Miss Peach, but it's certainly possible that you could never produce another thing ever, and you will still have been able to inspire Miss Peach in a significant way in her life.
And that actually leads me into my what I wrote down first. In actually like just accepting the compliment as being true and not assuming that it leads to me having to do something or be something or measure up to something, that feels arrogant to me. And I know it's not. I know logically it's not arrogant to just say thank you and accept the compliment and move on. But in my mind, I guess because of this new thing that I just found while we were talking, that I've been abused so many times with compliments leading to, you know, me having to do something or measure up to something in order for me to like be aware that something's going to happen, I had to look at it like I can't just accept the compliment because I have to wait to see what I have, what's coming. And if I just accepted the compliment, that would be arrogant because that would mean that I wasn't even accounting for there being something that I needed to do to earn the compliment after
Right.
the fact.
Like your hubris at just assuming that you just get this compliment
Right.
for no reason.
Right.
I
Which is
understand.
really messed up when I say it out loud, but
But it's important, I think, to say these things. I think that this is probably something that a lot of people go through, and nobody ever talks about this shit. Nobody ever
who
says these
wants
things
to?
out loud. I do,
I do too, I
but
know.
you know,
But that's why we're doing a podcast. Nobody
right.
wants to talk about these things though, but us.
Well, I mean, we might find that that's different.
Maybe it hasn't had a lot of opportunity in most people's lives to talk about it.
Right.
To know whether or not they even wanted to.
I mean, for you and me, it was just that we both found somebody that was moderately interested in talking about
We were
that
both
stuff.
hemorrhaging emotionally.
Sure.
That's
I
really
mean,
what it was. We couldn't not talk about it.
but I think it did have to do with a little bit with who we were, that we were interested in those moments between those thoughts between the things underneath our perception and our consciousness
Mm.
that feed into every aspect of our lives. So yeah, yeah.
Okay, and then I have like 3 points here that may all cause a further conversation. So I have one that's kind of two that's connected. That kids feel good when they get complimented. Like it's just natural for them to they get complimented and they're like, "Yay!" And they get this like moment of pride of like, oh, "I was acknowledged." And they said I did it good. And so then they're like really feeling good. But then like where did that change? What trauma or circumstance took that away? I think I found mine already talking. But I think that that's an important thing for us to listen, like to think about. If we're having problems accepting compliments, then we have to go back and try to remember a time when we were a kid being told, "Oh, you that was awesome what you did on the monkey bars," or "You ran really fast. Good job." And you were able to just accept that as a compliment. When did that change? What happened? That doesn't mean that you have to necessarily do it right now, but
No, no, no. I know. I'm thinking about it. So, uh, I'm just kind of talking out of my ass here, based on whatever my brain
put your
thinks of.
pants back
Um,
on.
and I think a lot of times those early compliments come either from our parents or from people that are around while our parents are also around, because our parents kind of are around a lot. Now, this is speaking from a certain place of privilege, of course. My parents were moderately around a lot when I was a kid, but certainly there's other people out there that didn't really have a lot of parent perspective. But I think that a lot of times those early compliments come from people that we respect as elders and that as caretakers in a way. And those elders and caretakers, while complimenting us, are expecting us to advance, because raising a child, part of that is going through a progression system.
Yeah, but do you think that we're actually aware of that in the moment?
Of course not.
Yeah. So I mean, that's not quite the same as me feeling like
No, no, no. What I'm
being
saying.
complimented is expecting that I need to do more later.
No, no, no. But what I'm saying is that I think that it's systemic.
What do you mean?
I think that I think that that children eventually losing that feeling of being complimented and just being like giddy and joyous about being complimented in whatever regard.
Mm-hmm.
I think that flees because of a systematic issue within the way that we parent.
It flees because parents or society expects us to systematically improve.
Basically, the kids receiving that compliment feel great, and then at some point in the future they didn't do that same thing and they weren't complimented, or they were berated for not doing as well, and so the compliment, when it comes back, has less power or feels different. And so instead of a compliment just being a good thing, just a way to go, just a gold star, it becomes more of this is information for future expectations
Well, see, that
for
just
kids.
sounds like it's more of a mental deficiency that humanity has, where we're placing value on the absence. It's different if they're berated for it. That one
Yeah, yeah,
I understand. But if it's just not there, like, does that lead to a different relationship with compliments
I don't know.
than if somebody was berated?
Maybe.
Or do they seem to have similar, like, an overlap to it? I don't know. I was berated.
I wasn't really ever berated. I did have the absence occasionally, and I did get compliments. I did fairly well in school. I got decent grades. I was in the fucking gifted program and bullshit like that, and so I got compliments. My parents were unhappy the first time I got a B of any sort,
That sounds like berated.
but they didn't really like. They just had that whole like, we think you could have done this better.
Okay, I'm using berated in a broad sense. It's not just like you should have done better, but also like that whole I'm disappointed, or even the anxiety of like what happened? Why
Mm,
didn't this happen? Because I expected it to.
a negative
Those
reaction
are
from the
all,
parents.
yeah, those are all just sort of wrapped up in my concept of being berated.
Yeah, I have like three memories of what you're talking about being berated. My first B in fifth grade, the one time that I like threw a little bit of a tantrum because I didn't get to go to my cousin's house and I got spanked, and then the one time that all of me and my cousins were roughhousing in the back porch, and I had the genius idea that instead of trying to use my admittedly way less physical power than my cousins to actually affect them, I would instead make myself small and get behind somebody and make it to where they tripped over me. And that was far more than my grandmother would allow, and she picked me up and spanked me. And I was like 6, 5, I don't know. Those are the only three I remember. And so I don't think that I really had a whole history of beratement in my past.
Yeah, but do
But
you have a
I
history of
hate,
the praises too?
I have some praises, yeah. Every time I achieved what was expected by society standards, my mom was pretty happy about it.
Mm.
Um, and I I got a little bit of lamenting, I guess, occasionally when I didn't, but it didn't seem like it was very often. But anyway, still compliments really affect me in a pretty strong way. I'm pretty sensitive to them, uh, and maybe it's because I don't think I really believed my parents from a younger age. I think that I was pretty young when I stopped believing that my parents were actually excited for me as a separate entity accomplishing something, and more that it was a reflection of them.
That's weird.
I have a lot of weird things from my
No, I mean,
childhood.
I don't mean like weird, like you're weird, but like
I am
weird,
weird.
like that sounds like there was a situation that happened that you're not
Remembering, it's
remembering
possible.
or acknowledging that made it. Because like kids don't think their parents lie to them. That's not a normal thing. In fact, as children, we're like kind of dependent on them, on believing everything that they say is true. So like if you at an early age believed that they were lying to you, it I know that you're saying it was like, oh, they're doing it for society, but like they're at base it's still a lie in your head.
I actually know what event,
Oh.
but I don't think this episode's the right one.
Totally fine. You don't have to share it at all.
I'll remember. I've shared it with you multiple times, so I'm happy to share it again at
The
some point.
wonderful thing about vulnerability is you get to choose when you're vulnerable.
Yeah, that's true too. Absolutely. It's more about time right now. I'm not really uncomfortable with the story. It's just that it would take a while to tell, and I'm also going to have to throw out several disclaimers because it sounds like one of those things that doesn't. It, from an outside perspective, from my perspective of an outside perspective, it sounds like it's unlikely to have happened.
Okay.
But anyway, sorry, I stole this.
That's okay. I got the other two, which is like different types of compliments or different situations of complimenting. They feel different. So like I have appearance compliments versus compliments on like your skill or an action you did.
Hmm.
Those all feel very different.
Well, yeah, there's a huge difference between being complimented on something that is through your own blood, sweat, tears, and effort and will, and through something that you had no control over.
Right.
That's like people that are quote unquote classically attractive, where a majority of people walking around them are just going to be like that person's hot. those people, they're like, I didn't do anything to earn this. I just happened to have a symmetrical face.
Yeah,
You
the
know what I
weird
mean?
thing for me is that it's so much easier to accept a physical compliment because it's not something that I really had that much control over, but I can just accept it.
Oh, interesting.
You know, because, well, there's nothing like the only thing that would be expected of me from that. I know that. I know that journey. I know that path.
It's
And
comfy.
I'm already. No, it's not so much that it's comfy. It's
I'm sorry, familiar.
I'm already. I'm already so like attuned to that possibility by the time somebody's complimented me on my physical form. Like I've already prepared for how I'm gonna either shut you down or what I'm gonna do if you do this. Like I've already made those things, so like I already know what's gonna happen with whatever expectations could jump out of the woodwork for me
Mm-hmm.
on that particular respect. Whereas if it's a skill or an action that I did, that's way too much effort to have those kinds of reactions, responses already pre-planned.
Mm.
And so I just kind of freeze, like, oh my God, where could this possibly take me now that I've been complimented? Somebody saw me. Oh no.
Right. Yeah, 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 absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
but
Somebody paid attention to what I did. What?
right. But then, like, those kinds of compliments can be divided even further. Um, and we're gonna set the appearance ones aside because that's a whole other ball game where those can happen. But like with skills and actions, if you're complimented at work versus by a friend or versus by an academic or your lover or like all these different roles have a different flavor to the compliment.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, every individual person that inhabits those roles also presents a different flavor as well. So like with everything, it just becomes a case by case basis again.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like with the compliment versus the giver and receiver. And you know, I want to take a moment, just a moment, to think about the compliment giver as well. You know, because we're
Mm,
talking about receiving compliments, but
right.
like giving compliments can be very difficult. It can be a very vulnerable thing to do as well. Like
Yeah.
you have to.
Oh my God. Do you remember that time that I told you about when I was in the hospital? I don't remember who with, but I was in the hospital, not for myself. And there was this really beautiful but kind of heavy set woman,
Mm,
and she just so happened to also be black. And I complimented her on her appearance, and she like looked at me like I had five heads, and I felt like a dirty old man trying to,
mm-hmm.
squeeze her tits or something. I was like, oh my God. I was so embarrassed, and I was just complimenting because she had this radiance about her. She looked so beautiful, and I just felt like I wanted to let her know. And I don't know if it was because it was just like difficult for her to accept the compliment at all, much less from a middle-aged white girl,
Mm.
or if it was that I was just being creepy at the time. Like I have no idea.
We can't really know, unfortunately, specifically from that interaction, and it could have been an enormous number of things. I mean, that lady could have thought in her head as soon as you said that, like, bitch, you don't know my life, and just walked away. Like, you
Right.
know, like you're at the hospital. She could be really having some hard times right now. So, like, you know, it could be anything. Or she could just be mean. Like that just happens too. Uh,
I mean,
but
she said thank you and
oh,
went
that's nice.
away. So it wasn't
Okay, cool.
it wasn't like she didn't
She just
try
gave
to
you a funny
receive
look.
it. It just there was this very awkward, just kind of like almost fear, like fear confusion, fear
Mm.
fusion
Mm-hmm.
in her eyes, and then she like walked. She like went away as fast as possible without running.
Right. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it because, like, there's first and foremost, we do not need to defend the freedoms and rights of white men. I'm just going to say that first and fucking foremost.
that's that's where we're going.
But I've certainly heard of a lot of people who have had the experience of just being a masculine person that they're afraid to give compliments now because everyone receives them. You can't compliment anybody no more without getting slapped, which
I
is
mean, I get it. I'm afraid to give compliments now too.
I'm a little afraid at times, but I'm starting to try and get better at it. There was a time 10 years ago, 6 years ago, years ago, that like I had this idea that what I was going to do was when I saw people out in the world that I thought were attractive, I was going to yell the compliment towards them and then just immediately run away so that they knew instantaneously that I expected nothing from them and they would never see me again.
Actually, I was just thinking that I think that's the problem. Like, I have a fear of complimenting people, but the more I think about it, the more that fear comes from me wanting something out of the interaction, where I want my compliment to be received in a positive way. But if I stop trying to expect anything and just I want to give the compliment, and if they don't receive it, that's okay. That doesn't mean anything about me.
Right.
And maybe I just touched on something that's painful for them. It doesn't really mean anything about them that I can discern.
Right.
It means something about them. It just doesn't mean something about them that I can say.
Right.
And if I could just compliment them without worrying about the interaction that happens afterwards, I probably wouldn't be so afraid to compliment people.
Right. And I just wanted to give a little bit of advice about that too. Not that I have a place to sit in anything, but I have no place. Don't trust me about anything. I'm not an expert in anything. I'm just giving you my thoughts. But
not trying to mansplain.
No, definitely not. But like having no expectation for a compliment is very important. Absolutely. I threw off my thought. Like I did genuinely threw off my thought.
Your disclaimers do that.
God damn it. That sucks. Read my Jimmy the Simp article. No, but
I'll put a link to that too.
What I was gonna say, you don't have to do that.
Okay. You said it.
You do it. It's
you
fine.
said it. I'm putting it in there.
Anyway, if you can boil down your compliment to its barest meaning, I think that you'll find that your compliment will be received the most honestly. And I would say this to the misogynist asshole white dudes I find in bars too, because when they boil their compliment down to its barest necessity, what they're going to say is,
I would like to fuck you.
I like your tits.
Or I like your tits.
And honestly, you know, I'm a verbose motherfucker. I like words, but like when you start flowerizing and like putting a lot of thought and attention into how the wording of the compliment is going to be, sometimes the meaning is lost. And so if you boil your compliment down, what you mean to say to this person, then at least hear it in your own head and see if it sounds offensive. And even if it does, maybe go for it. And if it's received poorly, then apologize. Apologize. You know, if someone's like, fuck you, you're like, nice dress, and they're like, fuck you, say, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel that way.
Or you could just accept the consequence, because actions have consequences. Some consequences are good, some are bad, some are neutral, and we all have them, and they're part of life.
Right, absolutely. Well, don't just, I mean, you know, you can accept the consequences and also apologize.
Yes, that's true. But yeah. For some people, apologizing is too much. Either with social anxiety or their pride's too high, whatever. But if you can't get to the apology part, at least get to the part of just accepting that this was the consequence of what happened.
Right.
And that doesn't mean anything about you, and that doesn't mean anything about them. It just means that particular moment, that was the consequence. If I had been able to find a better moment or a better way of saying my compliment to that nurse, it may have gone better.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't put it on her that I couldn't come up with a good way of not being awkward about my compliment. And I'm not going to put it on me either, because I'm not really sure that was something wrong for me to do.
Right.
It's just the way it happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's okay.
And understand that if you boil your compliment down to, I want to fuck you, that's not a compliment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to make sure you know that.
That's an expectation.
At least an expectation.
Least. Yeah.
So yeah.
Before we wrap up, because we're
we're late.
Yeah, we're getting pretty long on
Sarah,
this one.
I'm so sorry, it's a long one.
I just want to kind of go over a little bit of why is it hard to accept compliments. I think we kind of touched on that through the thing, but we didn't really point blank it. The internet says it's because of social anxiety and or low self-esteem.
I mean, that's a moderately okay answer for that question.
And I believe it's because narcissistic people and abusers are threatened by people's confidence, and so systematically break it down during the early formative parts of our life and cause the social anxiety and low self-esteem.
Like vindictively,
I
intentionally?
don't know that they're doing it because, like, I think it's a reaction. I think it's a mindless reaction, like most abusive is. I mean, most abusers aren't actually formulating their abusive behaviors in their head and thinking, "Wah ha ha ha, this is going to do so much damage." They just respond. They react to things.
Right.
And I think that this is one of the ways in which narcissistic people and abusers react to confidence. They are threatened by it and so have a knee jerk response to squash it or make somebody feel bad about it. Oh, you're being too arrogant about this, or you're not really that good.
I don't think so. The way that you're saying it, I'm maybe misperceiving, but I'm perceiving you basically saying that like people that are inherently abusers or narcissistic do these sorts of things, and it affects all of us.
Yes.
I'm gonna say that my perception of it is that some of the abusive and narcissistic tendencies within people do this, because I think that there's people that push that sort of thing
Yeah.
that you're talking about, but aren't always shitty. Like,
I mean those words, narcissists and abusers, for the moment that they are being narcissistic or abusers.
okay,
I allow the possibility that those people could heal and become better,
well, sometimes
non-narcissistic, non-abusive people.
some of those things just happen in the moment. Some of those
Yeah,
things are
that's true.
mood based. Some of the times I'm in a shit mood and something terrible happened and somebody came up and I shat all over them and then they held that for a long time because they were 7 when it happened.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like that certainly does happen, and that person maybe was only bad in that moment. But yeah, it's those sorts of tendencies that I think does fuck us up. I'll agree with that.
Whew. Okay, I think we're probably done. How do you feel?
I'm pretty good. I had one thing that I wanted to say about the next episode, but I forgot what it was.
Well, the next episode is going to be about anger and conflict. It was a suggestion by Sierra and Lane. So, if that helps you.
No, no,
No.
it didn't help bring it back
Well,
at
maybe you'll
all.
remember before next week.
Maybe, but then I might forget before the actual thing happens.
Write it down. All right. Well, anyway, I'm the accidental monster.
And I'm Eternally Mortal. Thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you all find smiles this day.
And you can find us both on medium.com. And until next time, follow each other, follow the dopamine, and follow yourselves always.